So in terms of our follow-up, here are some things from our previous sessions that just to jog your memory, to finalize your freelancing plan, update your portfolio, LinkedIn, website, choose an entity if that's appropriate. And tonight we're working on a bid. So we're going to do that. We're going to work on that right now together. And then a marketing video script, if you think that's the right time to do that, introducing yourself in a short video. So let's start with the bid. And I've just put it into slides here so we can take a look at it together. So this is a bid. I've scrubbed the client name, but it's a bid that I request for a proposal that I received about a year ago. And so the objective is to understand the needs of their users better, who are looking for a payment solution. And here are some few scant details about it. It's a B2B business. They want 10 to 20 interviews. The methodology is in-depth interviews, one-on-one interviews that are remote, about 1 hour. It's a mix of countries, the majority in the US, but the client is actually not based in the US. The timeline, November, December of last year, and they'll all be conducted in English. What do they want? A research plan, including a discussion guide, and they'll provide questions, the interviews, conducting the interviews, and then analysis and a report. So our task is to come up with a bid for this project as a way to practice how you would provide a bid. And then once you come up with a bid, I'm going to show you 2 other actual bids and you can compare your bid to those bids. So to make it, so I'm just going to have you try to do this right now. Just kind of walk through this example and say, well, one way to do these, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do these, to do a proposal. For example, one way is if you don't have enough information to provide a fixed bid, you can just say, well, look, here's my hourly rate, and I'm just going to bill by the hour for whatever this takes. If you feel like you don't have enough details, and there are definitely details missing from this proposal, you can also, of course, message back and forth to the client and say, ask some questions to fill in some of those details. But in this case, let's say we're just going to move forward with the information that we have and produce the best bid we can. Now, from a previous discussion, why is it that we would want to do a fixed bid instead of hourly? Okay, Bernard, you raise your hand. Go ahead, ask your question. You're muted.
Because I'm coughing a lot.
Okay, no problem.
What's the budget? and maybe that's also something with the question you just asked. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were about to ask that question.
No, it's fine. Well,
yeah, go.
Your question is excellent. When we heard Danielle speak as our special guest in one of the earlier sessions, she said, if you can find out the client's budget, well, then you have the most valuable information you possibly could to prepare your bid. But we don't know their budget. And a lot of times they won't reveal their budget. They're going to say, here's what I need. Let me know how much you would charge to do this. And they're not going to say how much they have, because if they do, they're worried you'll spend it all.
It's hard to. Anyway, go on.
So that was an excellent question to ask. So let me say, by the way, Bobby, thank you for joining us. Welcome. So I'm going to ask each of you to just do your own estimate and say, how many hours do you think it would take you to prepare the research plan and the discussion guide? And we're going to have 3 chunks of hours here. That's the first chunk of hours. What's it going to take you to do the plan and the discussion guide? And then once we have a total hours, we'll multiply it by the hourly rate you want to use and come up with your bid. By the way, for this discussion guide, they've said that they'll provide questions for us. The client will provide research questions, but we need to complete the discussion guide. So estimate your hours for the plan and the discussion guide. Next, estimate your hours to conduct these interviews. Now they've said it could be 10 or 20. And so in a case like that, I would assume one or the other and then let them know with your bid, my proposal is for 10 interviews. So let's just assume it's 10 interviews and we'll prepare the proposal for 10 interviews. And if it turns out to be more, then you could say, well, I'll adjust my bid, or additional hours I'll bill at a certain rate. So what's your estimate of hours to conduct 10 1-hour remote interviews in English, thankfully? And then third, what's your estimate for analysis and report? You'll have 10 interviews. How many hours do you want to give yourself to do the analysis and the report? Okay, we're going to compare notes in a minute here, but I'm just going to let you each work separately for now. And now typically people rough out their hours like that, select their hourly rate, and then just multiply and come up with their total bid. So I say, choose your hourly rate, what it is you think you'd like to do this project for, and then multiply it out. Now, of course, there's some strategy here. If you're starving and you absolutely have to get this job, you're going to bid lower than if you're booked and you don't really want this job. You're too busy. And in that case, you have the luxury of bidding high. And if they choose you, that's just a cherry on top of the other work you already have going on. So depending on how badly you want the project, your bid may vary, or how busy you are, by how good a fit it is for your background. If you think you are absolutely the #1 researcher they could choose for this project, then maybe you want to bid a little bit high because your background is excellent. If you've done research on payment platforms before, if you came from Stripe or something, well, then you could probably bid pretty high. Another question is how well they know you. Do they know you? Have they reached out to you specifically? Do they want you to do this project? In that case, you might have a little more flexibility too, to choose your higher rate rather than a lower rate. So hopefully that's been enough time for you to figure out your hours, figure out your rate, multiply. I'll say one other thing. Most people in a fixed bid put in just a little bit of padding. Now you can decide what that is, but I would say before you choose your number, I would say, look, put in 20% padding, 25%, something, because there may be unknown things. For example, here they don't tell us who's going to recruit the participants. They don't tell us if they've got a platform they're going to provide. I mean, it's possible some of those tasks will come to you. Hopefully, we're going to clarify those things with the client and say, my bid does not include recruiting the participants. My bid does not include having a platform. But if something goes wrong and they expect you to do it, and you're in the position of, okay, well, I want to please them, so I'm just going to do it. Then maybe you've got a little bit of padding in there, a couple $1,000s, and you could recruit the participants. You could pay for a platform and use it for this project. Okay, that said, Bernard, do you want to tell us your estimates? And then anyone else who wants to tell us their estimates, I'll invite you to tell us as well. But let's start with you, Bernard. What were your hours estimates?
Sorry, I'm still counting.
Oh, you're still counting. All right, let me ask, is there anybody who
I just have to do a quick counting.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Won't be long.
I was going to ask if there is anyone else who has their numbers together who could tell us their estimates for these 3 components?
I got some estimates. that's assuming that I already have like my own set of templates and like tools in place to kind of get some of this stuff rolling.
Okay, well, tell
quickly.
us, just, I mean, what,
Yeah.
part of what I want to show you is it's really a shot in the dark with these, with these proposals. You're just gonna, come up with the best numbers you can. Tell us your hours estimate, Sierra, for the 3 components.
So it's a 3 for research plan. Assuming that I already have the template, and then I'll have to go in and tweak their questions to remove bias and things like that. 15 hours for conducting the interviews. So I figure like 10 hours to actually conduct it, and then 30 minutes for kind of like setup and scheduling and things like that. And 45 hours for 45 hours, going by kind of the rule of thumb that for like every hour of interviewing, if they're 60-minute interviews, that would take like 3 hours for analysis. But I would hope to have like a tool like Dovetail or something where I could tag, like have a transcript and tag and group insights like that.
Mhm. Okay, so your estimate is 3 for the setup, 3 for the plan and the discussion guide, 15 to run the interviews, 45 for the analysis and report.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. I just wanted, let's see what everyone else gets. Bernard, what are your estimates? Try not to change them based on Sierra's.
No. Okay, just a
All right,
minute.
we're gonna give you some more time.
Where
Patty,
I am.
work at your own pace. Patty or Bobby, did either of you do this
Yeah,
exercise?
I need to get the UI. I lost the UI. What's going on?
Okay, Bernard, I'm gonna let you work on that. Patty.
Yeah, I didn't. I've been
I'm
following
sorry, I
along,
lost
but I
the
didn't
UI.
jot down numbers. But I concur with what the first person just said about like all the time that would go in. But yeah, I don't have a specific number, but I'm listening.
Okay, awesome. Well, no, that's totally fine. That's totally legit. No problem. Listen and see what you learn from it. Bobby, anything you want to contribute?
Sorry, I was a little late, so I'm still trying to understand what exactly we're calculating. And I know Sierra's kind of breakdown was a little bit helpful. So we're calculating the amount of time it would take for a research plan to conduct the studies and to analyze and report.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And I think Janine said the interviews would be virtual.
That's there. Yes, remote.
Okay. Is it kind of like dependent on whether it was like a usability test, or is it just kind of a general?
My sense, I mean, we just have this information from the RFP, but my sense is they're trying to understand their client better.
Okay.
The needs, the technical capabilities. So my sense is this is not a usability test. This is more kind of foundational research.
And you said that there would be about 10 participants?
Yes. So they've said 10 or 20 interviews. We're going to assume 10 and we're going to provide them a bid for 10. And if it's higher, we'll ask to adjust our bid for additional interviews.
All right.
Okay.
I'll give us let me get a moment now to break it down, and I can provide something back in return.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to go to Bernard and then we'll come back to you last. Okay. Okay, Bernard, what did you come up with? Oh,
Okay, yes. So my estimation, I have a 8 hours research plan, 10 hours discussion guide. My question, roughly, 10 interview. Assuming that they found the participant and they are happening on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever. So 1 hour interview, I put 1 hour and a half analyzing. roughly. And this, so all together, it's 43 hours plus 25%. So that's 10.75, but let's say 11 hours. So a total of 53 hours all together,
Okay,
10 participants. Well, what do we have for that? Well, we're gonna have a few qualitative data. You're gonna have some storytelling, and maybe some view about the problem and what we talk about as well. Yeah, maybe I should have 2 hours at least for first initial interview. So, or do like my colleague Ring, the first consultation is on me. I found that very good. Very good. Ring,
Okay.
she's in a group.
okay, Bernard, we're gonna go with 53. That's a great estimate.
Okay,
That's
that's roughly what I have.
Okay, good. Bobby, let's go back to
And
you.
in the middle of the, you guys hear me? Yeah. So
Yeah.
and
Okay, Bobby, let's, do you have your numbers together?
For the most part, I'm kind of breaking it down. And we're also supposed to calculate kind of the hourly rate or what we would overall kind of charge kind of thing.
You can't, obviously, we're gonna multiply these hours times a rate, and that's how you're gonna get the amount that you want to charge. And you can either give us the rate or not, but let's work with hours to start with.
So I basically agree with Sierra, except for I would probably allow for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours for the plan based off of my experience. That way we can kind of go back and forth and just kind of make sure everything is situated, the protocol and everything we wanted to do. And I would almost give 30 minutes per session just to make sure we have plenty of allotment. That way, if it is something that is usability testing or even kind of A/B testing, we can kind of dive deeper, but that's more assuming it's going to be a more of a moderated session. If it was unmoderated, I might actually go back down to 15. So I would say probably about, from there about 550 for the setup. And then for analysis, I kind of agree with her idea that, usually with an analysis, it's about 60 minutes per person. So that's about, 6,000 minutes of review. Though I am also one of those crazy people that like to watch it on like 1.5 or 2 times speed, in case it's since especially if I moderated it, I already know what is the expectations and kind of things I know I want to go back and note and reflect. So I'll put in a safe buffer of 60 minutes for each one of those. And then in regards to the report, I guess it would also depend if I'm giving an actual physical report or if I'm doing a presentation deck. So I kind of put in there for about 3 to 4 hours of that, just to make sure to bring out any kind of other analytics and data from the research or quotes and everything like that, and kind of make sure to isolate some of the video sessions too. So I wasn't able to kind of get a overall, but those would be kind of where my numbers would lie overall for what I would estimate a overall project to be, with a lot of buffer already included with that. So that would kind of be my estimate. So it's relatively close to kind of like how she had like about 7,000 minutes, and probably if I broke that down to, I would say that's probably about 120 hours work of work I would estimate for that. So I'm not too sure how you were calculating the rates, but that would be what I would be basing at least the hours spent on average for a project. And that's on the high scale.
Okay, so when you did 6,000 minutes. Oh gosh, so sorry about that. Did I just touch the wrong button here? Maybe I didn't.
No.
Okay, sorry. Your 6,000 minutes, was that 60-minute interviews times 10?
Yeah.
That would have been 600 minutes.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, like I said, I was trying to rush through some of this stuff, so I was just writing down offhand. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So, and that's
So-
even, like I said, an exaggeration.
If we just stick with hours, let me just review. So about 2 to 4 to plan. So let's say 4 to plan. And then you wanted 30 minutes prep for each session. So about 5 hours.
Yeah.
The 10 sessions, that's 10 hours. And then about 4 hours to do the presentation, as long as it's basically just a basic report.
Yes, that is a much better answer.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So I'm just trying to total them so we can compare. So what I get from yours is 10 plus 5 plus 8, or 23.
I think it'd be roughly about, I'm trying to do the math again. So it's 4 hours, 5 hours, and then 60 minutes. So an hour per, so that would be 10.
Hours,
And then 4. So yeah, about 23 hours work would be the max. I'd probably even estimate that up to 25 just to be, nice even numbers.
Okay, good. Good. All right, let's take it to 25. Okay, awesome. Well, you can see already how your bids start to diverge dramatically one from another. Bobby, at 25 hours, yours is a very aggressive bid. And you may win this business. Although, the lowest bid doesn't always win, but you may have the most aggressive bid. And it looks like Bernard, yours comes in second at 53 hours. And Sierra, yours is at 63 hours. Yours is maybe the most comprehensive bid. Does that make sense? Okay, well, so then, of course, you can multiply by your rate, the desired hourly rate, and then you'll have your number that you want to charge the client. Let me now show you what 2 researchers bid on this project who I sent it to, so you can have a touch point for comparison. This is researcher A, and in fact, also you can see their comments, and it helps you maybe understand this whole process. Researcher A, I don't think there's quite enough information. Who's responsible for recruitment? So that's an issue we highlighted. She did as well. What's the client expecting for a report? Bobby, you kind of touched on this. Is it just something simple, or is it a full presentation? So that makes a big difference, right? If you're presenting to executives, you're going to want to polish that, and that's going to take some more hours, maybe even some time, design time. Are the interviewees subject matter experts? In other words, more time for you to prepare to speak at their level. Okay, and then she sort of gives her process. I tend to use a spreadsheet to list out my estimated hours times the hourly rate, add 20% for miscellany. So kind of the similar process to what we went through. Here are her numbers. About $10,000 to $12,000 for 10 interviews. So if we were to use 50 hours as our estimated time, because a couple of you, Bernard came in at about 50, and Bobby and Sarah were above and below that. If she were using 50 hours and a $200 an hour rate, she would come up with $10,000, just to give you an idea. And then she said she likes a 20% fudge, and maybe that's 20% gets you to 12,000. So to understand her numbers, it could be 50 hours at $200 an hour. For 20 interviews, she already lets them know what that would be, an extra 5,000. And then she said, this is to me, not to the client, which is a total ballpark shot in the dark, because so often responding to these quotes is, you don't have enough information. You're making a number of guesses. You don't know who else is bidding, so you just give it your best shot. So that's her best shot. $10,000 to $12,000, a fixed bid. Any comments or thoughts about that? Any learning from what we just saw that she did?
Well, I like the term ballpark. This scenario is quite realistic to my opinion. Based on the few that I've done before. It's always incomplete, and the buffer is very, very important. So, but quite good.
Okay, good. So
And
quote A. Let's go on to researcher B. who's somebody else that I sent this to. I nearly always do fixed price projects that are comprehensive. I base price on a series of factors, as in the obvious, how many sessions, how complex, things like the timeline, the availability of participants, whether or not I have to manage recruitment. So once again, she picked up on the same thing. The range of 10 to 20 is really broad. Are they all the same type of user or not? There's more work in customizing plans, mod guide, data analysis for multiple user types and comparing the data. All very good points that would make the study more complex, more time consuming. So let's move on to her numbers. Oh, wait, I missed the last comment. What was the last comment on her page? I'd also like to know what they want as an output. Data analysis is one thing. Crafting a C-suite ready presentation is another. So once again, picking up on the same thing, Bobby, that you picked up on. It's like, how refined is this presentation? Just a report, a Google Doc, or is it a full presentation? So not knowing those answers, here's her quote. Very roughly, I would probably charge now they don't do it in hours, they do it in money. 3,000 for planning, mod guide development, etc. Now, Sierra, if that were you, you'd be charging $1,000 an hour. So this is kind of a luxurious quote here.
I'm okay with that.
18 sounds good. 18,000 for moderation, which doesn't sound very moderate, does it? So I think she's including 10 or 20 participants. So maybe we can assume the higher number of 20 participants, $18,000. Analysis reporting, another $7,000. So we're up to $28,000 on this bid. Whereas I think, Bobby, your bid would have been a fraction of this. Maybe a tenth of this. Or actually, I shouldn't say, but anyway, so any comments about this second bid?
Yeah, I have more of a question, and maybe this is what we're going to get into, but what does the back and forth between you as a freelancer and a client look like? Because I'm assuming a lot of these places, I mean, I work in-house and it seems like my own product team doesn't know much about what user research is or what they think they know what they need. So when you have to get into the weeds with some of these things, like what does that look like when you're trying to bid for something?
Okay, that's a great question. So sometimes you're sent out an RFP and there's no additional information. For example, the client is sending it out to 20 different potential researchers to bid the project, and there's not really a back and forth. They've given you all the information they're going to. But more typically, Sierra, it's someone that you do know, right? Someone you've worked, they're sending this to you because they know you somehow. And in that case, you probably do have the chance to go back and forth and ask some clarifying questions. Am I recruiting the participants? Do you have a software platform for us to do this? Some back and forth. What kind of presentation? What level of presentation do I need to create? So yeah, I would say more typically you do have a chance to get a little bit of information, but sometimes some of the more formal ones, like government bidding and things like that, it's kind of formal and they don't let people ask additional questions. They just sort of say, here's the information, you all have the same information, submit your bid. But I would say that's a little more rare. But typically you do have a chance to ask some questions and go back and forth. Okay, awesome. Well, so awesome. I just wanted you to see these, first of all, have the experience of creating your own estimates and then see what others came up with. Sierra, it was interesting to me, the biggest chunk of yours by far was an analysis because of your giving 3 hours of analysis per hour of interview. And that's more than, I mean, looking at this one, for example, you can see that's anyway, that's just a different weighting than others might have given. But the beauty is, of course, you can do your own, do the proposal in the way that makes sense to you. But that's why it's handy to compare one to another and see what others came up with. Okay.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So let's move on. I mean, I have just a few follow-up comments on doing these proposals. First of all, why do them? Why not just give hourly rates? It would be so much simpler. You don't have to guess how many hours it's going to take. You just say, well, look, if it takes 25 hours, like Bobby estimates, I'll charge you for 25. And if it takes 63, I'll charge you for that. But the beauty of these proposals is you can make more money than hourly. That if you've done similar work before, like Sierra, you said, if you've got some templates already, you can reuse those templates. And maybe it won't take you the full amount of time it would take someone if they were doing it for the first time. So the whole idea of these fixed bids is to make them more profitable than hourly. Because if not, you might as well just work hourly. Okay, and then when should you bid? I mean, if you don't want to waste your time, because it can take, this was kind of a quick experiment, but some of them can be quite lengthy and take hours to prepare. I mean, it could take half a day to prepare a bid sometimes. And in that case, you want to be a little bit strategic and just bid on the ones where you've got good experience, where you think you have a good chance of getting the contract, or they know you, you have some special advantage. You live in their city, so you could do the interviews in person, more easily. You don't have to do them remote. Anyway, whatever advantage you might have, then that makes sense for you to bid because you're more likely to get the work. If it's just come from a government agency and you have no connection to them, it may not be worth spending a half day on it if you don't think they're going to choose you. For a repeat client, you can ask for an exclusive. So before they send this RFP out to others, you can say, look, can I give you a bid first? And maybe you can save your time. You don't have to go out to ask a bunch of others. And if you like the bid, then you can spare yourself the effort of doing it. So if you're kind of on the inside, that's one way you can maybe get an advantage to getting the project. And in fact, maybe work with them and say, look, if you have a certain budget you're trying to meet, I'll try to meet your budget so you can solve, your problem. Okay, and you can pass on the request if it's being sent out to dozens, there's no connection to you, you don't think you're necessarily a good choice. But those are some of the ideas with RFPs, when to bid, when not to bid. Those are sort of more advanced than just hourly. So freelancers starting out usually just charge hourly, but maybe hopefully you'll work your way into this at some point, because more advanced researchers like these two who bid both prefer to do fixed bid work and not hourly work. Okay, what are characteristics of good projects? Well, first of all, a good company. And that may be why you want the project, is to say that you've worked for, a marquee company. Good companies typically have good products, good teams to work with, which are all nice. A long project makes it good. Instead of just, for example, we were bidding, 25 to 50 or 60 hours here. Good projects go for a long time, a few weeks or months. Those are the best projects. They have an established process. They have the tools. They have support people so that you don't have to do the recruiting and things like that. That's a great project. So that you can really just focus on the research, assuming that's what you prefer. Interesting study. You have some interest in what they're researching. That makes it, more valuable to you. A sufficient lead time. So often these studies come in and they want you to start immediately, and you may not be able to work that in. You may have other clients. So having sufficient lead time is a good characteristic. And then that they'll pay your rate. And in fact, that they'll pay at all, that you can count on them. So those are some of the characteristics that I would look for in a good project. And if enough of these are missing, then maybe you say, well, I'm not that interested in this one. Another small issue, do you charge for travel? Well, travel expenses, yes, everyone charges for those. Per diem, so that's your, food and maybe Uber, transportation. Travel time, the time to get to the location and return home. I would say it's all negotiable. Companies pay these expenses, and then these parts are negotiable. You can ask for a per diem while you're there. A per diem can be a fixed amount per day. You can just say, well, I'd like $75 a day for meals and transportation from my hotel to wherever I'm conducting the interviews. And then travel time, I would say the assumption is it's not paid, but you can ask for it. If you do ask for it to be paid, I would recommend not at your normal research rate, but maybe half of that. Some portion of your research rate to compensate you for the travel. And when might you ask for travel time? If it's unusual, if this travel is to their office to do the work, then maybe they're not as likely to pay it because you're commuting in from someplace remote. If even their researchers would have to travel, let's say you're going on site to a client or you're going to Disneyland or something to run these interviews. Well, if anyone would have to travel there, then you have a better chance of charging maybe for your time to get there. Any questions, thoughts about that? Another small issue, you may need to hire additional help. This was kind of a small project, but let's say it was much bigger than this. It's got a lot of interviews. They need to do them in 1 week. You might have to hire another moderator to help you do these. These were moderated interviews. You might have to hire someone else to help you. Let's say you had to recruit. You might want to hire someone to do that. A note taker or administrative help. In any of these cases, you could, if you need to hire this help, then I suggest that you hire them as independent contractors, which is sort of the next idea here. How to hire them? I mean, if you hire them as employees, you need to do payroll and deductions, and it's a big hassle. So if you keep them independent contractors, that makes your life a little bit easier. There's a lot of government scrutiny with withholdings and filings and things like that if you hire them as employees. So that's if you get to the step where you need to hire help. So let's pause for just a sec. Any question? I'm just going to stop my screen share. So that's kind of our end to this whole bidding section. How to prepare a bid, what things to consider in doing a bid, travel, hiring others who might need to have help you. Hey, by the way, Jason, welcome. I'm glad you joined us. Awesome.
I couldn't make it any earlier tonight, so I just thought I'd peek in at the end and kind of see what you're all about. So,
hey, fantastic. So glad you joined us. So we were working on bids, submitting a bid to do work as an independent contractor, as a researcher. And we just went over a sample bid together, and then some other issues that might come into play. So glad you've joined us.
thank you.
We'll share the recording and the slides with you if you want to see.
Appreciate it.
Anyway, just wanted to say welcome because I saw you here, and so that's great. Any questions from anyone? Anything you want to discuss before we move on from this section about bidding? Submitting bids. I'd say it's a pretty darn important part of freelancing, and it's the kind of thing you just learn by doing, and you get better at over time. If you put in a bid that's too low, you learn very quickly from that experience. Too high, you might not get the work. It's really tough but you could see how wide the gap is between the bids that we saw. And so a client, has a big choice to make, which is, should I go with the lowest bidder? Do I think they'll do good work? Do I pay more if they don't know the difference between the researchers? Okay, so let's go back and do some more kind of this next section. which is now more about bookkeeping, which is nobody's favorite thing. So we're going to kind of breeze through some of this, but I just wanted to touch on some of it because it's actually, quite important. So for this record keeping, obviously quotes, proposals, contracts, copies of your studies reports, client communications, sometimes this can come into play. You might need to go back and refer to this. It's also very handy for your next proposal to be able to refer to your previous proposals. And then in terms of bookkeeping, time and task tracking, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then invoices, payments, back and forth. This, of course, is going to be important for bookkeeping and tax purposes. So you have to track your income and expenses. Whether you do your taxes yourself or hire a CPA, that's going to be important. And of course, this separation between personal and business expenses is important. We went over this in the legal section where we talked about getting a separate bank account, getting a separate credit card, different things that you'll need to keep your expenses separate. Especially if you're setting up a corporation, you want to be pretty formal about that separation. And your CPA is going to be thrilled to see that you're kind of formal about how you separate those two. So do you need software to do this? Well, there are a lot of different choices if you do want to use software. Here are different aspects, here are some different choices you can look at. Some of them are just, QuickBooks, their self-employed edition, not necessarily just for, anyway, a scaled down version from their normal version to make it a little bit easier if you're an independent contractor. And then, various options here. A couple of other options I want to show you. I guess they're not on this slide, but they're specific for freelancers. And you might take a look at them. I'm just going to slip over to them here, which is Harvest is one of them, and Hectic is another. I'm going to mute you, Lotus. Hey, that's awesome. That's awesome that you're joining when you've got your hands full. Way to go. Anyway, check out these two apps if you're looking for a tool like this, like a more comprehensive freelancer tool, because that's what these are designed to be, and they're really inexpensive for all the kinds of things they do. For example, helping you send out proposals, manage a project, and then do the bookkeeping at the same time. Okay, we're just going to keep moving forward. I mean, some of the most important things are really your daily time tracking, because that you do that a lot more than your invoicing, which you only do every couple of weeks or every month. So the things you do very often, you want to have a good tool for. I guess that's the point I want to emphasize. Okay, Fiverr has an app as well that that's available. For invoicing, okay, here are just a few different apps for invoicing. Some of them are free. I mean, a lot of these tools are free if you're just using them kind of a minimum level. And so, for example, you can use Wave for invoicing for free. Some of these others too. Okay. All right, so that's the income half of your record keeping. Let's just go to the expense side. Of course, one of the advantages of being an independent contractor is you can write some things off that you can't as an employee. So what are some of those things? These office supplies, website, work-related software, apps, fees, membership, training, these things all can become an expense for you. Any services that you need outside design, marketing, accounting, legal, all that can be written off. Work-related travel and mileage. If you get insurance or advertising. A couple that are a little trickier that you want to check with your CPA are the home office deduction and health insurance premiums. Under some circumstances, you can write those off. For example, health insurance premiums, if you have an S corp, you can write those off. So, of course, you want to take advantage of some of these things if you are freelancing, because it can reduce your overall income and a CPA can help you. So what do they need? I mean, just the best records you can of your invoices for freelance. Of course, a lot of times you're freelancing on the side, you've also got wages, so they're going to need to see both. Your expenses, if you've got a dedicated credit card, it's going to make it simpler, and if you put as much as you can on that. And then whatever other ways you've paid your expenses. Tricky things are if you pay with cash or your personal card or check, then you need to kind of straighten those out. Or, funds transfers back and forth. If you can keep a spreadsheet or something, that makes it a lot easier for your CPA. Okay, one small issue, which is these tax deposits. And Patty, is it you that was saying you had done some freelancing this year and you were just coming to the end of your first year?
Yes, so I didn't realize I'm supposed to be depositing taxes quarterly. It's good I'm here.
Okay,
Yes.
so you haven't done one of these yet.
No. I haven't.
Okay,
I
no
started-
worries. It depends. I mean, your income has to be over a certain threshold before you need to do these tax deposits. But let's just go through a kind of a quick.
Okay.
Okay, so here's a quick example. So here is from the IRS website that they want 4 different deposits. If you're making enough, then for the first 3 months of the year, they want your deposit by April 15th. And then, of course, it can't be as simple as every 3 months. April and May, they want it by June. June, July, August, they want it by September. And then the final quarter, they want it in January. This is actually a 4-month chunk. They want it in January. It's a little tricky to figure these out. There's actually this awesome app that I'm just going to take us to. Well, okay. So this awesome app just lets you input your details, and it quickly, like Patty, after our call, you should do this. So you sort of say, all right, I'm single. I have no dependents. Do I have an S corp? No, I'm just a sole proprietor, right? If you haven't set up an entity yet. Do you have 1099 earnings? Oh yeah, okay, you have any wages besides 1099? You probably do. And now they want to say, okay, so wages, what do you have? And you just put in your estimate. Let's say your wages are going to be, I don't know, I'm just coming up with this, not 6,000. Let's say 60,000 are my wages. And then how much are my freelance billings? Let's say 10,000. Okay, well, there you go. So based on what we just told them, they've told us what our quarterly deposits should be.
And that's assuming that you're not withholding anything on your wages.
That's funny because I would assume that on the wages, the taxes were being withheld and all I needed to cover was this freelancing income. So I think I've misused it because this deposit seems to cover both to me. If I'm doing 4 times this deposit, that's covering both, the 60,000 in wages plus the 10,000. So
yeah.
So instead I would just put in your freelance income, and I think then it'll give you the accurate deposit amount. But it's kind of a cool tool, you got to admit, to just simplify that whole process. And of course, you can just do this for the quarter. In other words, whatever quarter you're in, if you made $10,000, you could just, ideally, I would want it just to know what my next quarterly payment is, not what all 4 are. But if I just made 10,000 in the last 3 months, what do I have to pay for this next deposit? But anyway, kind of a cool app. So I just thought I would show it to you because it kind of simplifies a lot of the mumbo jumbo of figuring those out. And by the way, Patty, if you don't do them, it's usually not that big a deal unless your income was huge. If your freelancing income was, $50,000 or something, then I would get serious about them. But if it's smaller than that, it's typically not that big a deal. What happens? Your CPA can kind of straighten it out at the end of the year for you.
Yeah. And then having the full-time job on top of it, you just lose a lot more taxes because it's all, percentages. So I imagine I could probably still owe in the end. So no, but that's helpful.
Well, one of the advantages, I mean, once you're doing both freelancing and full-time, you start to see the difference. And that's part of the motivation to move more to freelance, because you have a lot more flexibility with your freelance income. So you do get to keep more of your freelance income depending on how you handle things. But your wages means that a lot of your taxes are being withheld anyway. And that's part of what makes it okay at the end of the year. If you didn't do your deposits, because the majority of your taxes have already been withheld in your wages. And if you were going to get a refund, well, maybe instead that's just going to cover your freelancing income. Okay, how to pay? Well, there's a federal site you can pay. And then there are also, most states have sites where you can make these state tax deposits too. That app we just did was for federal, and that's usually the bigger one. But you may need to make state deposits as well if it's a large amount. So you need to find out for your state how to do that. Okay, all right. And sometimes there are tax coupons and things like that. Okay, so the last section, and I'm just really, this is not much of a section anymore. It's like, okay, if you're leaving your employment and you need to get your own insurance, how do you do that? But this is less of an issue than it's been in the past. I mean, option one, of course, is keep your last coverage as long as you may want to, if you like the coverage, if the rate is good, keep your coverage from your last employer. So there's, strategies for doing that, hanging on to that. The changes that have just been made to the Affordable Care Act are what make this really a lot easier than it's been in the past, because all the plans are now subsidized and they're really a lot more reasonable than they've been in the past. And then, of course, they're off marketplace plans, but the subsidies make these on marketplace plans so much more accessible and affordable than they've been in the past, that you really don't need to look into a lot of these other options that are shown here. Let me just, oh yeah, Canada has its, Bernard, I guess we have you, I don't know if you're still with us, but Canada has its own thing, which actually makes it easier. But let me just show another screen if I can about these subsidies, because those have really changed things. So this screen is showing the subsidies of up to the federal poverty level, which is a funny way to think, but you can make depending on your income, these subsidies can pay for all of health insurance or a big chunk of it. And at the highest, they only expect you to, like, no matter what your income is, they only expect you to pay 8.5% of your income in medical premiums. Let me just go to another window that maybe it dramatizes it. So premiums that used to cost or a premium of $2,500 a month. So this is for a family of 4 making $110,000. At this point, there are subsidies available that make this plan cost only $779 instead of $2,500 per month. But that's the benchmark plan, which is a silver, kind of a rich plan. There are some plans that are free for a family of 4 making $110,000. So that's just to show that it's really this kind of subsidy that they put in place last year because of COVID is remarkably generous, and it makes freelance insurance really easy because you can just get it on the marketplace subsidized, and that's probably your best option for insurance. This subsidy lasts until 2025. So for the next few years, it makes it very easy to find freelance insurance. Okay. All right. And that's okay. The last thing. So the one other great thing about employers is they have 401k plans that you can save for retirement. And one thing freelancers sometimes don't do is sort of think ahead that way, that if they plan to be a long-term freelancer, they need to be doing something like that. But there's a thing called a solo K, which is great instrument for doing that, for your own 401k. And it can be either 401k, it can be either a Roth or a 401k or both, that you're putting away money. So it's either pre-tax or post-tax money that you're putting in. You do have to use W-2 wages to go into the plan. And so this is for example, if you've set up an LLC, and I don't want to get too complex here, but you're taking some of your money as wages and then some of it as other income. On that wages portion, you can put money into the solo K plan for retirement. Okay, and the limits are very generous, like up to $20,000 for an individual, 27, I think, if over 55. If you have a spouse, you can contribute for both of you into the plan. So the limits are really very generous for contributing to a plan, a solo K plan. Okay, Canadian pension, Bernard, we're not going into this, but you know how this works for you. It caps for Canadians at a smaller amount than our self-employment tax in the US. So it's not as big an issue as our self-employment tax is. Okay, so final ideas, if you want to continue on to freelancing, finish your plan that we talked about a couple sessions ago, update your LinkedIn, your portfolio, your website. I recommend working with a partner so that you have someone to keep you accountable and motivated and keep moving, so you don't just sort of give up on the journey. And then, start when you're ready and the opportunity arises, start doing some freelancing on the side and seeing if you can build up a business and how much of your income you can get from freelancing, and if that can replace your job at some point, which is really the dream, if you can get to that point. All right, so that's kind of the prepared material. Any questions, any points of discussion, clarifications? We kind of went through that quickly. Patty, thank you so much. Awesome. Glad to hear your comment.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm thrilled that you all participated in our quoting. So I think that was great. I hope that was valuable for you to give you just a little bit of experience. Okay, and I'm just looking at the chat to see if there's anything else here for us to pick up on. Not necessarily. So this was our 5th session, our final session in the series. If you missed any of them, the other tapes are up on YouTube. You can go take a look. I'm happy to be a resource if you have questions like for your specific situation that you want to ask. And of course, there are a lot of other great resources available too for the different aspects of this. We're about to put up the recording of the attorney who had joined us for session 4. I thought he was great, and he's got a lot of good comments in terms of choosing an entity and some of the legal issues for freelancers. Oh, for example, he has good comments. If you're working for one employer and you're freelancing for other employers, some of the issues you need to be aware of. That's kind of a sensitive issue, because you owe a duty of care as an employee to your employer, and you need to be careful about that. All right. Hey, I just want to thank you for joining us. If there are no other questions, thanks so much. We'll call it, and please circle back and connect with me if you have anything you want to discuss.